thank you very much for being with us here today. A warm welcome to you. Welcome to Paris. Welcome to the 16th Forum on Responsible Mineral Supply Chains. And welcome to one of the first sessions that's being organized this year. I'm very happy to see that you came in such medium-large numbers. We were too early planned to gain an interested audience, but I'm very happy to see you all here. Let me introduce myself. My name is José Diemel. I'm chairing this panel session today. I work as a senior specialist on responsible sourcing at Levin Sources, where we work together with private sector partners and governments, responsible mining and working to achieve responsible supply chains. I've worked the past 10 years on responsible mining, especially in the DRC. Imagine that I was very delighted to receive the invitation to chair the panel today. As ASM, formalization is a topic very close to my heart, and I believe that mineral credit systems are a great tool to move towards that. Today I'm accompanied by a panel of expert speakers on artisanal mining. We're all very well placed to provide their perspectives across the supply chain, from mine sites to the downstream industry, and different organizations that work towards setting up mineral credit systems. So let me introduce to you today Juliana Posada Lopera. Welcome. Juliana is part of a small family that runs a mine site in Colombia called La Gabriela. On the other end of our table, we've got Yves Kasongo. Welcome, Yves. ASM liaison at the Camilombe mine site in the DRC, where cobalt is mined. Lisa, who's sitting next to me, works as project manager of Fairmining at the Fairphone. And she will provide us with the industry perspective today. Martin Piersiak, we've discussed the pronunciation of his name quite a bit, trying for a French vibe, but then I understand he's Polish. So welcome, Martin. Martin is executive director at the Alliance for Responsible Mining. And then lastly, my former colleague at the Fair Cobalt Alliance, David Sturmes. David and Martin will take you through the functioning of mineral. Give them a warm applause, please. So how will we go about our session today? We decided to divide it up into two parts. During the first part, we'll run you through a couple of presentations, with me following up with some questions to provide you, like I said, the perspective at the mine site, at downstream level. And then we'll talk more about mineral credit systems and how they function. The remaining 45 minutes, we'd like to open the floor to questions. So that's why I'm very happy that you're here. Want to exchange with you, hear your experience and ideas as well. So let me warn you that I'll ask you to actively participate. So please take notes during the presentations if you have any questions or you'd like to have clarifications, to remember them for the second part of our session. Please feel free to be curious and share, because I think that's why we're here in Paris and traveled all the way to have this exchange and learn from each other. So to engage you, we thought it would be good to start with an interactive question to wake up the room, but also to understand a bit where you stand in terms of your beliefs on ASM and responsible sourcing. So the question is, imagine that company X sources minerals from a conflict-affected and high-risk area, which is known for the prevalence of child labor. What would you, as you'd be an advisor to this company, recommend the approach regarding ASM material? Oh wow, I was going to talk you through how to use Menti, but I see that's pretty straightforward. So for those who haven't done it before, you can go to menti.com and enter the code, or just use the QR code. I'll give you a sec. Please remember there's no good or bad answer. You can choose multiple options as well. Thank you for sharing your views. I think we're almost there, looking at the percentages. This is good. It's very interesting to see. I think we expected a lot of people to say due diligence. We expected a lot of people choosing for traceability as well, so that's an interesting one. I'm very happy to see that a lot of people say you need to source from ASM communities. I think that tells a lot about the audience that we have in front of us today. So at the end of the session, we would like to pose the same question to you to see if we managed to influence your views on ASM sourcing and credit systems. So please keep that in mind while listening to the presenters. Okay, and to wrap up my introduction, the objective of the session today, I'm going to quickly talk you through it. So I think it's no surprise to many of you, or to most of you, that ASM comes with a lot of negative connotations. So I think you've all seen the pictures of child labor. You all know how 3T and gold mining can be connected to conflict financing, and how mining leads to environmental degradation if not managed correctly. And so although ASM provides a livelihood for more than 40 million people around the globe, please let that sink in. I think it's an enormous amount of people, a big number that you should memorize. Still, stigmatization of ASM leads to companies avoiding association with ASM. So they minimize reputational risk. We've seen companies stating that they will not source from ASM. We've seen companies that try to look for alternatives to cobalt in batteries, for example. And recently we've heard companies state that they want to refrain from mined material at all, and to only work with recycled materials. So although that's understandable from a company's perspective, especially if you take a risk-based approach, I think it leads us to a situation where downstream action does not lead to improvements at mine site level. So it leaves us with a conundrum, where on the one hand we have artisanal mine sites that need significant investment to improve conditions at the mine sites, and on the other hand we've got downstream players that hold back on sourcing from ASM because they fear reputational damage. So today we want to explore how we can bridge that gap and discuss ways that downstream companies can help to participate in the transformation of the ASM sector, and the role that mineral credit system can play there. We'll look at the functioning of mineral credit systems. We'll look at the issues they address, the benefits they generate, both for mining communities and for downstream players, and also the limitations that we've come across so far while using them, and next steps that we need to take the systems further. So I'd like to give the word to Juliana. Juliana, welcome. I already shortly introduced you. Thank you very much for being with us today. So I understand that together with your family you run a small gold mine, La Gabriela in Colombia, where you coordinate mining and agricultural activities. Juliana will speak Spanish with us today, so Martin is kindly offered to help us translate. So please bear with us that the presentation will take a little bit longer than the other ones. So the mines at La Gabriela was established in the 1990s, and since 2018 it has entered the Fairmined certification system. And so I think it's a great start for the audience to kind of dive together with us into the mine site perspective. So please, Juliana, take us with the preparation of the pictures that you did to the day-to-day life at Gabriela, and talk us through the achievements you made over the past years and the challenges that you encounter.
Hola, espero que se encuentren muy bien, muchas gracias. Bueno, como ya lo mencionaron, mi nombre es Juliana Posada y hago parte del equipo de trabajo de Mina La Gabriela. Somos un proyecto a pequeña escala según la regulación colombiana y estamos ubicados en Colombia en una zona de conflicto armado. Somos,
Hello, my name is Juliana Posada. I am part of a family business in Colombia. We are located in a zone that is affected by conflict.
Nosotros comenzamos el trámite de formalización ante el Estado en el año 1994 y solamente lo pudimos obtener en el 2011 después de hacer muchos trámites, de hacer nuevos procesos.
So, the process of formalization in the year 2000, and only 11 years later we managed to obtain the mining title after a lot of hassle.
Contamos con un equipo de trabajo conformado por 16 personas, de las cuales 12 son hombres y 4 son mujeres, de forma directa. Indirecta, hay 2 personas que nos acompañan, que son mujeres también. Hemos impactado a 64 integrantes de familias y alrededor de la zona, de forma indirecta, a 320 personas. Hasta el momento hemos hecho 25 procesos de capacitación, no solamente en la parte ocupacional, sino en la parte técnica.
So we employ directly 16 people, while 64 families are benefiting from this formal employment, but also the mine is a kind of economic center of influence, and over 300 people have been involved and benefit indirectly. And we have over 25 capacity building processes with the whole team in the mine.
Aquí podemos apreciar los procesos de capacitación. Empezamos en el año 2012 y actualmente pues continuamos en ese proceso.
Here is just to kind of show the before and after of the efforts to improve the occupational health and safety.
Aquí podemos apreciar que en el 2023 ellos están más preparados, ahí ya se involucró el sistema de gestión, la capacitación ocupacional, hacen uso de su dotación, de sus implementos de protección personal y específicamente ahí estamos haciendo el curso de alturas.
Mentioned that it's not only putting the casks and overalls, but there is a whole process, a management system of risks where the miners understand, identify the risks in the mine, and actually prepare to manage them every day, including the work with at altitude.
Como ejemplo de mejoramiento tenemos en la unidad de beneficio una adquisición de tecnologías limpias para ya eliminar el mercurio. Esto nos ha ayudado a triplicar la producción, eficiencia en la recuperación del oro y menor consumo de agua y de electricidad, por ende menor consumo de combustibles fósiles.
We have also managed to make some improvements in the capacity of mine, improve the technology, and that resulted in in triple productivity and also the reduction of the use of water and electricity.
Contamos con un componente ambiental que nos ayuda a mitigar los impactos causados por la minería, para generar también otros ingresos económicos y empleo en la región, como las actividades que podemos apreciar aquí de cacao, caucho, abejas, piscicultura y ganadería.
So apart from this and achievements such as eliminating mercury in the mine, we also try to promote coexistence with other activities such as farming or agriculture.
ARM ha construido una plataforma llamada Progress App que permite hacer un seguimiento al desempeño y en los diferentes aspectos de la empresa y es muy útil para todos aquellos que nos deseen conocer.
Apart from kind of showing the pictures, there is also a system of measurement of progress that is behind it. It's an online platform that kind of helps comparing the performance of the mine from one period to another.
Los desafíos que hemos tenido nosotros en la cadena de suministro empiezan porque el 80% de la economía minera colombiana es informal. Entonces estamos en una zona de conflicto armado y mantenerse formalizado es difícil y costoso.
So our issues with the supply chain start with the context of informality. More than 80% of the mining in Colombia is informal, and also in the context of the conflict, it is very difficult to actually. It's a big effort to maintain a formal economy.
Es decepcionante tener un producto con un valor agregado y no hay demanda de este.
And then also sometimes the supply chain complications affect the possibility to sell our product with the premium, with the value added, and this is really disappointing and frustrating after the efforts we've made.
Es necesario para nosotros vender cantidades que se extraen para tener un flujo de caja, pero esto es limitado porque el material no es posible, pues si no hay mucho material no es posible realizar la venta y nosotros no tenemos acceso a créditos bancarios para ayudarnos como otra opción económica.
So because our production is small, around per month, and we don't have any access to any credit to working capital, we need to maintain liquidity by selling often small quantities of gold. So it's difficult for us to accumulate and then sell more efficiently.
Estamos limitados a vender a personal certificado, pero muchas pues están ubicados lejos de donde estamos. Entonces preferiríamos vender local para no incurrir en gastos y en situaciones peligrosas por el transporte del material, pues en este caso oro.
So also to access the certified chain, well, you have a limited number of actors, of local actors that you can sell to, and sometimes it's a limitation because for us, taking our gold to more distant places means costs, but also security risks.
Muchas gracias por su atención y su tiempo.
Thank you for your
Juliana, for sharing. Thank you for sharing this perspective at the mine site with us. I think it's key to start there. So congratulations! It's great to hear how far you've come and all the different achievements that you've managed to make in terms of increasing production, eliminating mercury use, and mitigating OHS risks. So at the end, the slide that we're now watching, you also mentioned a couple of the challenges that you're still facing related to maintaining the status of being a certified mine site, but also gaining access to finances. Those challenges, and what are your goals for the years to come?
Nosotros necesitamos apoyo, necesitamos que las entidades que rigen la minería se articulen. Nosotros ahorita, pues como tenemos una actividad que no siempre va a tener material oro, entonces a veces necesitamos ese apoyo económico para poder continuar la actividad y poder tener el mismo equipo de trabajo y seguir las actividades que realizamos.
So in order to really maintain the standards and formalization status and not have to basically reduce the employment, they need some kind of a safety net given these complex conditions of instability.
Thank you so much, Martin, for translating for us. For not everyone speaks Spanish as well as you do, I think. Thank you very much. I wanted to give the floor to Yves Kasongo. So as I said, Yves works as an ASM liaison at a big mine site, a cobalt mine site in Kolwezi, a mine site that's supported by the Fair Cobalt Alliance in terms of improving conditions on the ground. I wanted to invite you, Yves, to take us to the DRC and show us what Kamilumbi looks like and the realities that the miners face on the ground. Could you maybe let me know if I need to press the button to go to the next picture? Thanks.
Thank you, Jose. Good afternoon. As Jose introduced me already, and I have come here from Kolwezi in the south at the DRC, from where I have been working for Fecobot Alliance for more than 10 years. Prior, I worked for CEMATE, the government service dedicated to support artisanal mining for 10 years. So I would like to believe that I had a good understanding of the sector and its challenges. I see the importance of the sector and great opportunities for the development of my country. Today, I will focus on FCA, partner mining, and artisanal mine site, just outside the city of Kolwezi, that is called Kamilombe. We are planning to have leader of the local cooperative, President John Muyer, were with us today, but unfortunately, he is prevented. So he asked me to share a bit more about the mindset and the needs as a cooperative on this. The Kamilombe mine site is an artisanal mine site that produce copper and cobalt. As you can see on this satellite photo, the artisanal mining activity happens next door to large-scale open pit mining operation. Started in 2004 with a committee of miners. Next slide, please. It was only in 2070 that the cooperative obtained approval the Evolve as mining cooperative in Kamilombe. Where here the mine will attract up to 2,000, 20,000 miners. The price of cobalt, they are an estimated 7,000 to 8,000 mine and women that really on Kamilombe for the livelihood, about 10% of them are women. Most of them currently focus on copper extraction, waiting for cobalt price to recover. On data we received from the cooperative and the government service, we understand that the annual production value of minerals from Kamilombe exceed but the mine sites are changing. Many tunnels lack structural integrity and are poorly ventilated. Seasonal even though the cooperative has taken some measures to improve conditions, are not in common. some minor and some serious. And 2022, 7 people drowned in the mine when collapsed, collapsed due to the pressure of the Rhine. The evident solution is that we need to invest into improving this. For this reason, the cooperative and interest into on MU with the FC investment, whether is that Kamilombe, as well as most of all other artisanal mining sites are not considered legal. For of expert to help finalize the legalization process of the mine. Able to make some improvement. But individuals have been trained in first aid and are now safety captains. The workforce gets OHS and production as they start their staff. Stagnant stands across the sites remind mine to adhere to safety protocols. Are able to rent PPE that protect them from the contracted water they work in. We are now expanding to or the crusher or miner.
The mic on again, sorry.
The cooperative has also invested in the construction of the hospital outside the mining area, complementary treatment to mine workers. Already made a noticeable difference, but there is not denying that a lot more investment is needed to ensure that that people are safe at work. In this context, the cooperative agreed to work with FCA, set up a cobalt credit system to help them invest into these. Thank you.
Yves, thanks for the presentation. Thank you very much for your effort to speak in English. I know you've been working very hard to improve. When I met Yves 3 years ago, very, very big thanks to making that work. I think what really stands out listening to your story is that the challenges at Kamilombe are significant, especially when you talk about the fatalities of the recent tunnel collapse, the shaft ventilation that is needed, stormwater management very much needed to make sure that we prevent another tunnel collapse to occur. It's also impressive to hear the improvements that have already been made, the PPE for women washers, for example, but also the safety captains that have been trained. It's a very short question before we move on, Yves. We know that the Congolese government has set the CTC standard to require requirements for cobalt artisanal mining. So I'd like to hear from you what you think is needed for Kamilombe to achieve certification of CTC mining. And I think you pretty quickly nudged So I was asking, what do you think that Kamilombe needs to get up to a certification level?
Yes, I think we need to start with legalization. Is a starting point to improve that with a big effort we will achieve this this goal.
So much.
Thank you.
Then I'd like to move on to our next speaker, Lisa Miner, who works at Fairphone. For those who don't know Fairphone yet, I think you really should. Fairphone is a Dutch electronics brand that has as its mission to demonstrate that the sales of high-tech electronics can go hand in hand with creating positive impact. And I think they're doing very successfully so far. Lisa will take us along the Fairphone journey and how they've worked on responsible sourcing, and she will show us the downstream perspective on this. So Lisa, listening to Juliana's and Yves' presentation, I think the question arises, okay, if we see the challenges ahead of us, talking about the conditions at mine sites, what is the role of the private sector, of the downstream actors? So maybe you can talk us through that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. Really relevant question, right? I think Juliana and Yves have today shared very impactful stories about the mining perspective, and it's a really relevant question to ask as downstream companies. What is then our role in all of this? Sometimes we're quite far removed from the mines itself through our supply chain, but we are definitely connected in our operations. So taking one step back about what Fairphone is, we are a Dutch electronics company with a mission to establish a market for ethical electronics and thereby really motivating the industry to act more responsibly. And we do that on all different types of areas. We really work from within the industry to tackle the challenges that us and our peers are facing and to find solutions that can be impactful. And one of the areas that we're working on is fair materials, next to the others that you can see on the slide. Now today I'll dive into the fair materials part of this, our sourcing. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. And I think the key thing as a downstream company, we feel that we are responsible to invest in responsible mining. And we know that there's challenges. We've faced them ourselves for the past years. We've been working on integrating recycling as well as Fairmined materials into our supply chains. And we focus on 14 key materials where there's key challenges to address. And we feel we have the responsibility to invest in improvement. And we've found key challenges that have made it very difficult to really trace back the minerals that are sourced into our product, and therefore to targetedly invest in improvements at the mine sites. But that we also feel that that doesn't take away our responsibility to overcome these barriers and to find solutions to actually engage in this essential step in due diligence, where you engage with mining organizations and you invest in improvements on the ground rather than disengagement, what Jose also introduced to us in the introduction. So today I want to share with you the challenges we've been facing, and maybe some of the downstream companies in the audience will recognize part of the challenges. We won't say that it's all easy, but also presenting here today the credits mechanism, we want to show that these challenges can be also overcome by using credit systems in certain situations. So we concluded that in 3 situations, 3 cases, it can really be useful to consider credit systems when considering responsible sourcing. One of these cases is when your leverage as a downstream company over your suppliers that are sourcing from their suppliers, that are sourcing from other suppliers, when your leverage is limited to achieve traceability about the material sourcing or to influence the material sourcing of your suppliers, it becomes difficult to really affect the sourcing. So that's one case where the use of mineral credits can be considered. Another case can be when there's no established certified ASM supply chains. We know that there's many issues related to ASM, and that these are actually the salient issues in our supply chain as artisanally mined production is supplying our global demand. And with our opaque and complex supply chains, we have to assume that also these materials are flowing into our supply chain. And a key responsibility in due diligence is not to disengage, but to engage and to invest in improvements. Even if we can't completely trace down where these materials are coming from, we feel that mineral credits are an important vehicle to at least start and take responsibility and engage with mines like La Gabriela and support them in improvements on the ground. I think the last case that I want to share, which is a very difficult barrier in working directly in your own supply chain, is what we have seen if little amounts of material are spread over many different components. I can give the example of gold, where 31 milligrams of gold are spread over more than 80 different components in the phone. And you can see a simplified supply chain visual on the slides. Each of these different components has their own supply chain with multiple tiers. And also the minerals at different processing steps in our supply chain are mixed into big batches. So it's very difficult for very small amounts of materials to really trace and track and integrate responsible materials in our supply chain. As an example, back in 2016, we partnered with Fairtrade to integrate Fairtrade gold into our supply chain. And after 7 years, we reached improvements, but we only managed to integrate 9% of the total gold content of our phone with Fairtrade gold sources. So we felt there was also a responsibility for a full gold footprint, the 100% of our gold content. And this is where we partnered at the end of last year with the Alliance for Responsible Mining to pilot Fairmined gold credits, where we can take full responsibility of our gold footprint. We can address some of the challenges that Juliana shared for them to access these responsible markets and the volumes required for that and the security risks. And also for ourselves, we can report to our investors, our consumers, the efforts that we're taking despite not being able to fully trace all the gold to responsible sources, the efforts that we're taking on our full gold footprint and the impacts that are achieved on the ground. So for us, it's been a very meaningful experience to work on mineral credits in the case of certified materials, but also to leverage investments needed for improvements in mining, where mining or more organizations have basic compliance criteria, but are needing investments on a continuous improvement trajectory towards certification, as is the case for cobalt. So I would like to invite any of the downstream companies present here today that maybe recognize some of the challenges that we've been facing over the years to consider mineral credits as a strategy to complement their responsible sourcing. And we're very happy to share our learnings and to connect on that. Thanks.
I think that's very useful. I shortly worked with Fairphone on a project a while back, and what I understood there is that Fairphone regularly receives questions from other downstream companies. So how do you do that? How do you do responsible sourcing? So I'm very happy to have Lisa here to kind of explain the challenges that Fairphone has come across and how they've approached those. I think there's a couple of things that really stood out, but looking at the time, I think I'll only pose you one question. So at the beginning, you said that you feel it's Fairphone's responsibility to invest in creating positive impact on the ground. I'd like to ask you to reiterate, like, why? Why is it not the responsibility of a mine site to come up with an investment, or of a producer country, for that matter?
I think the challenges that mining, the mining industry and artisanal miners are facing can't be solved by one actor alone. But I think that all actors need to do the best they can to step up. So also Fairphone, we want to take our responsibility, but we do that by engaging with the mining organizations. And as Juliana and Yves have been pointing out, some of the challenges with the investments required to make their production more responsible, those investments cannot be financed if the price of minerals is fluctuating and is too low to actually cover the cost of responsible production. So downstream companies have a responsibility also to play in there, and we also, in various of our projects, we also involve with local governments that have the responsibility to protect. So I think all different actors need to work together, but companies should not shy away from complex, opaque supply chains, because even if that's the case, we can see with the mineral credit system that you can have a role to play, and you have a material footprint that you have a responsibility over. So in this way, by engaging with the mining organizations, engaging with local governments, and also putting resources to investments, that is actually the role we see for downstream companies.
Thanks. Or in the supply chain, you have a role to play. I actually think that's one of Fair Cobalt Alliance's slogans. Thank you. So let's move on to you, Martin. Martin has worked on formalization of artisanal mining and connecting mine sites to the international market for responsible materials over the last, I think, 10 years, maybe even longer. So I think you've gained a lot of experience, amongst others, in setting up one of the first artisanal material credit systems, Fairmined. So Juliana explained to us what it has brought La Gabriela mine to work together with Fairmined. So I'd like to ask you to please kind of reflect on the achievements so far, but also the learnings that we can draw from your experience with Fairmined over the past years. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think it's it's really impressive how easy actually it is to define responsible sourcing. You just need to share the responsibility for the whole thing, without excuses. So congratulations on Fairphone's wonderful attitude. So we are Alliance for Responsible Mining, and yes, today's meeting and the whole Fairmined credits idea actually comes from a lot of learning over the last 15 years. Well, without going into a lot of details, maybe just to give you an idea of what Fairmined is, an organization. So ARM, we're an NGO that is born and still operating from Colombia, so kind of with a perspective of the producing countries. And what we've been developing over the last years is a kind of roadmap for ASM for progressive improvement. So kind of, to have an entry point for everyone, no matter how high or low they are. But we actually started with Fairmined, which is a certification system, a label with kind of robust audits, and the standard is actually quite high for ASM. And we wanted to do it to show to the world that actually you can have ASM that you can really be proud of, and really something that you want to lead the way and go towards it. And obviously, you need, if you want to share responsibility, you also want to contribute, you want to incentivize the miners, but also it is costly, as we've seen from Juliana's and Eve's testimonies, to maintain these standards and go forward. So Fairmined is a premium system. At the moment, it's up to $4,000 per kilo of gold. So we've listened about all the challenges from the electronics, from the upstream, what's happening on the ground. You may have people who are willing to support it, but sometimes actually to align everyone along the way, it's really a huge challenge. And it can be done. We have done it. Actually, Fairmined system, and you can see that over the years, so the miners have already sold 1.7 tons of gold, generating 6.5 millions of this investment, and there's a network of businesses. However, the challenges of this alignment with a physical traceability have been huge. And unfortunately, it hasn't allowed to scale it as quickly as we would have liked to. So the Fairmined credit, and it applies we've mostly worked with jewelry industry, and it's still, it's a simpler supply chain, but still it can be complex, because especially larger jewelers, they have, a network of sub providers, and if you want to, at each stage, segregate, treat the gold separately, it's not only a huge cost, but it's a massive headache for these organizations, and sometimes they are like this, nice, but it's too difficult. So this is, when you have issues, you want to think out of the box, and we've actually had this idea already in 2014, and kind of thinking about the possibility of this model, but we've never tried it out, but recently we're really looking, well, we need to innovate, because what can we do? So this is the Fairmined credits or certificate system, or tokens. I think it's kind of the basic idea is to disconnect the physical flow of gold. So you take it from point A and trace it all the way to the product, from the claim of responsible production, right? So basically, we are decoupling the premium payment and the support from the company to the mine, from actually receiving, the atoms, the exact atoms of gold from this mine. And in the case of gold, it's actually, especially interesting, because gold is gold. Like it's, basically there is no special characteristics of the gold, apart from the case of being responsibly produced, that makes it different, whether it's sold locally and kind of enters the system, the global supply chains, or it's there. It's different from coffee. Coffee has a taste, and you want to know, or organic production, because then you feel it's healthy for you, so you want to be sure that it's there. So what we thought, well, what we want is traceability, but of impact, of traceability of positive impact. So I'm actually supporting this concrete mine. I'm paying. I know what's happening with this premium, and we actually are quite diligent in documenting these investments, and every year there are some reports that you can look at, and it really kind of helps to move it forward. So just very briefly how it works in practice. So Juliana sells gold, rather than to go to the capital to look for the provider that kind of can deliver to someone who is willing to buy this gold. She can sell locally. It's important, obviously, that she sells formally, paying all the taxes and complying with the law and so on. And this is, up to there, we're tracing the gold. We're ensuring that the gold produced at the mine site, there's no other gold, that's coming in, and this is the responsibly produced gold. So Juliana receives an invoice. I've sold as much. We upload it to the system. We're testing it with the certification, because it's already quite a well set up system and we can test it more easily. So she uploads the invoice. We review the invoice. You know, we update the supply of these credits, of these tokens on the system. Then we have Lisa from Fairphone. She's like, well, you know, would like to actually have a connection, support this mine. So she says, okay, I'm going to buy 6 kilo worth of credits or whatever, and I'm going to commit to paying the premium deal, right? In this case, so you know, we talk, we kind of agree on the claims that they can make so that they are not confusing to the customers, and then the premium is transferred to ARM, and this is different because at the moment the premium is paid actually by the people in the middle, you know, so by the buyer. But because here it's a kind of more direct connection, ARM is channeling the premium with an additional advantage that we can together implement it as a project, and the mine doesn't pay the income tax. So there's also something very interesting about it. And just very briefly, so what are the benefits of this system? First, the miners, you know, they don't care when or where they are selling their gold, depending on the fluctuation, where the demand or when, you know, who they have to sell it to. They don't need to establish new supply chains, but they can, if they can still, you know, do export or whatever to improve the price. They have immediate payments for the gold, so we've heard the cash flow is an issue, and no extra hassle and administrative burden. How about the market side? So what are benefits for them? So first, you know, cost efficiency of the sustainability investment. You only pay for the actual impact on the ground, because she's going to receive this premium and she's going to ensure that they continue with the responsibility. At the moment, with all the complications, such a small amount of gold, you can pay up to twice or even 3 times, you know, the money that she's going to receive with the premium for the logistics all across the supply chain, you know. And is this where we want to invest the money? Well, we need to ask ourselves this question. So for the brands, they don't need to change the existing supply chain. Obviously, you know, they already have everything set up and they possibly do their due diligence. So that's fine. It's a very easy and immediate way to engage with ASM and directly support the ESG performance. Also, it's low risk because you are actually not integrating physically the gold into your supply chain. And for many brands, this is exactly, you know, the crucial thing. Like, well, we're going to have ASM Gold here. Well, we need to think about it. Finally, and I'm sorry, I'm slightly late. Trade, not aid. You know, philanthropy is fine. You know, you need to support communities, but miners are, you know, also, you know, quite proud folks, and what they want is really to have a recognition, but they want to be partners, and they don't want to, you know, just be on the receiving side, especially when they are giving so much.
Thank you, Martin. I really liked it when you said that the Fairmined credit system helps to produce ASM to be proud of, and not the negative connotations that it has often with it. So I'll leave the questions that I prepared for you in consideration of the time, because I know that David also wants to explain us a bit about the credit system that the Fair Cobalt Alliance is currently developing in a conceptual stage still, but a system that is addressing cobalt-specific challenges. So David, I can give you the floor to present.
Perfect, thank you. I'll quickly give a bit of background or context for cobalt for the people that are more familiar with the gold sector, just because it's a different beast. Cobalt predominantly comes from the DRC, but shifting a bit in the next 5 to 10 years, but 70% last year were produced in the DRC. About 10 to 20% of that came from artisanal and small-scale mines that operate informally but legitimately under the definition of the OECD. More than 10,000 tons of material. A ton of cobalt used to trade for about $50,000. At the moment, the prices are about half of that. but that means that they're responsible for more than $1 billion worth of copper and cobalt, because those two minerals occur together on an annual basis, and so they're huge. Aggregation, they dwarf many of the industrial mines that exist. That means that there's about 200,000 men and women that work in the sector. There's a unfortunate amount of children and youth also involved. The estimate here ranges from anywhere between 5 and 40,000 children, with 40,000 being a very conservative estimate. And that happens at about 40 different mine sites, 10 of which are said to have more than 500 workers. So it's a very concentrated sector, different to gold, which is mined in more than 80 countries, to my knowledge, and by 8 million gold miners. At the same time, I talked about a legitimate sector, but an informal sector. None of these mines, as Yves pointed out, are legally registered, making it very difficult for companies to actually engage in direct sourcing. The Cobalt Alliance, as a response to the concerns around child labor and the working conditions previously described, and with the goal of channeling investment into the sector. We believe that formalization and, more importantly, the professionalization of ASM leads to dignified and safe working conditions and can act as an economic driver in the region. And for that, we need to ensure market inclusion. As long as they keep selling into informal markets to actors that are not asking twice where the material comes from or how it was produced, they will be unable to get a fair price and actually make the investments necessary to stop the hazards that currently are associated or linked to their production. And in that spirit, similar to what Marcin said, we are saying that responsible sourcing starts with taking responsibility. Unless the downstream takes the responsibility to provide the resources necessary to invest, we to see any changes. And the proof is in the pudding. We've been aware of these challenges since 2016. It's 2023 now, and nothing has changed. So who's going to invest? And usually people are saying, well, I'm not buying from there, so why would I invest? I don't want to subsidize my competition. But that's a chicken and egg problem. Just a quick overview for the FCA, and I'd encourage you to visit our website, faircobaltalliance.org, if you want to learn more. But we are including Fairphone, comprising companies from across the supply chain, including industrial miners in the region that have ASM in and around their concessions, but extending to downstream companies and including midstream companies supply chain, with the idea that the further you go down, the more value is being added to products, the bigger the profit margins usually are, and then so the financial burden should be spread across the supply chain. And having said that there's larger profit margins towards downstream actors, Lisa also mentioned that there's more than 40 minerals in their phone, and they're working on 14 already. So you need to make a small contribution per phone, but as we will get to maybe also further in the discussion, if you were to pay a premium that is equivalent to 10% of the commodity value, we talk about less than 15 cents per phone that is being sold. Economical cost. That mapped out the supply chain. This is important to understand and very different from the example of La Gabriela, where there's a formal established actor, and that's also the result of several decades of formalization work. At the moment, ASM material finds its way into the market, as Lisa had mentioned before, yet there's no official market channels that companies could easily engage in. There are several tiers between a downstream company and an upstream producer. And you, different to gold, you're not purchasing a commodity as a refiner's would, but you're purchasing usually a finished product. And then selecting your battery supply chain is based on the technology, the price, the quality, the lead time, other contract terms. So you will not switch suppliers only because they're willing to source or not willing to source ASM material. Same solution, that's what this kind of model is referred to, is a response to that. Because, as pointed out before, unless you can prove the opposite, you need to assume that ASM is inside your supply chains, because we know for a fact that between 7 and 15% of global production come from these mine sites, so 7 to 15% of your material unless you have traceability to prove otherwise. And that's not an invitation to invest in traceability systems. There's reasons to do that and potential benefits to that. But the whole idea, as Marcin said, is not to invest in the costs of the logistics of proving disassociation, but actually using the resources you're willing to invest into meaningful, impactful due diligence and thinking about this as a collective responsibility. Slide. This means, different to La Gabriela, we are talking about an informal mine, yet we ensure minimum due diligence on the mine sites, meaning that they're not associated with any of the OECD Annex 2 risks that would warrant disengagement. And we have an MOU in place with CMDS to actually open their books figuratively and literally to allow us to track ESG progress and understand the production volumes that originate from the mine sites. We are in the process of setting up a premium allocation committee, which then would define priorities for mine development. And similar to the system that ARM has described, we will not make a cash transfer to the cooperative, but will implement projects that are selected by the cooperative. So the cooperative is in the driving seat, but to avoid any issues with anti-money laundering, corruption or embezzlement, these funds would be channeled through the Fair Cobalt Alliance and the facility as its secretariat, but with full financial transparency to both purchasing parties and the cooperative, so full visibility on how funds are being spent. Is in the process of defining priorities for projects that they would like to work on. These projects have been, or these focus areas have been selected in alignment with an ASM ESG framework that has been developed through a multi-stakeholder process over the last 3 years. And so largely speaking, it's about keeping people safer, keeping children out of the mine, improving business conduct, and ensuring dignified and safe working conditions for both men and women. As part of that idea, that was on the previous slide, but you don't have to go back, we are thinking about ring-fencing a certain percentage, probably 30 to 40% of the premium for women-centric programs, where a subcommittee of female miners is allowed to set their own priorities. And from initial engagements with them, we do understand that their main concern is work, so access to PPE, but also childcare and child labor remediation, which could then fall under those buckets. Down to what the claim is for companies, and in order to attract their interest, but also prevent allegations of greenwashing, since this is very unconventional if you're coming from the idea of having to physically integrate a product to engage in responsible sourcing. And here there's different ways of articulating their company engagement, and we would look at how much money have we spent, how many credits have we purchased, with a fixed credit price rather than a relative credit price being set for the next couple of years, or relative articulation, which we would encourage. So saying we've purchased credits equivalent to 9%, 20%, 100% of our own consumption. And based on my previous introduction, if you assume that between 7 and 15% of your product come from ASM, why not purchase 15% of your product footprint as an equivalent to these credits, as they're equivalent to responsible material or legitimate material on the improvement journey towards best practice entering into the market. Market demand for cooperatives to join in. With that, I'll keep it to 8 minutes. Welcome questions and engagement here, and this is very much a session to also pick your brains and see if there's any volunteers to help us refine and launch this successfully. We're looking at a launch for this in August, so we are on the final legs of getting that done, but we want to get it right. So it's important that we involve downstream companies, but also civil society or just smart people that are willing to make this work in order to get traceability of impact rather than exclusion of ASM as it currently occurs in the cobalt sector.
Thanks, David, for sharing all these new bright ideas and for making sure that the cobalt sector is not lagging behind too much on these developments. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that has brought us to the end of the session today. I know Martin really would like to respond, but I feel there's also questions still within the audience. So I'd like to invite you to maybe approach the panelists during a coffee. We've got a couple of days ahead of us. So I'm very happy to see there's lots of interaction and that it's a topic that interests most of you. Maybe to conclude, I think it's fair to say that the responsible sourcing puzzle is not one yet that's solved already, but I can see that credit systems really help as a tool, although not a panacea yet. There's a couple of risks and drawdowns that still need some attention in terms of how can we make credible claims, for example, what's the role that traceability needs to play, and how can we make sure that we don't bypass key actors at the mid-tier of the supply chain? So that being said, I can see that credit systems bring a huge potential to bring together the upstream and the downstream actors within the supply chain. So concluding on that remark, I'd like to thank the audience for sharing your experiences and your questions, for being so engaged, and for the panelists for their all their preparations and for sharing their views. A warm applause, please.